Okay, this is a 204 voice for 12 minutes. Starts with the court. The People versus Douglas Lee Roscoe. Ready, Your Honor. May the record reflect that my appearance is for the purposes of the preliminary hearing only. At this time, we will request all witnesses be excluded and admonished not to discuss their testimony. All right. All witnesses in the case of the People versus Douglas Lee Roscoe are excluded from the courtroom, excepting the presently testifying witness and the investigating officer, and admonished not to discuss the case. Mr. Haber, please be seated and state your full name. Roy Haber, H-A-B-E-R. Mr. Haber, what is your business? I am a real estate salesman. Where is your business located? 2019 South Hacienda Boulevard, Hacienda Heights. Does your real estate agency deal with the selling of real estate in the Hacienda Heights area? Yes. Did your real estate agency handle the escrow on a house at 14407 Eadbrook Drive in Hacienda Heights? We had, but this is not closed. Your agency had this house under its control or possession on the 7th of March, 1973. Object to that as calling for a conclusion. I will sustain the objection. Did your company have its house for sale, or was it sold on March 7, 1973? Yes. Pardon me? Yes. When was it sold? I don't remember the exact date that it was sold. Is that the night in question that I was up there? Yes. Oh, that particular night the home had been sold. I would object to that, Your Honor, as calling for a conclusion, and I would like to take him on voir dire. No, I will overrule the objection if he knows of his own knowledge. That is what I wanted to find out. I think it is based on hearsay, Your Honor. Wait a moment. Ask him if he knows of his own knowledge and what that knowledge consists of. Mr. Haber, just a moment. I'm asking the district attorney to ask the witness. Mr. Haber, do you know from your own personal knowledge whether that house was sold on March 7, 1973? Yes, I do. It was sold? It was sold. Your Honor, I think the evidence will develop that the office that Mr. Haber was involved in didn't sell the house, but some other broker entirely, and this is based on hearsay. You may take him on voir dire. Mr. Haber, did your company sell the house? No, my company didn't sell the house. Now then, your testimony that it was sold is based on what somebody told you, or something you saw in writing? Well, is that right, sir? I am asking you whether it is your testimony that the house was sold or not is based upon what somebody told you or somebody you saw in writing. I know myself from writing that I saw on the escrow. And just answer the question, yes. I object to his testimony, Your Honor, that the house was sold as being his conclusion based on hearsay. I will sustain the objection. Mr. Haber, what role did your real estate agency have in dealing with this house on Eadbrook? Object to that, Your Honor, irrelevant. Overruled. My office had the exclusive right to sell that house. You had the exclusive right to sell it? Yes. Did your office have the exclusive right to determine the occupancy or possession of any persons of that house on the 7th of March? We have the exclusive agency with a listing. Well, I don't think I understood the question, sir. On the 7th of March, sir, you were handling the transaction of that house. Is that correct? Yes. And on that date, was anybody in that house occupying that house? Nobody was occupying that house at that time. To occupy that house, to live in that house, from whom would they have to seek permission? Objection to that, Your Honor, as being too broad. I will sustain the objection. Did you have the key to the house? I have the key to the house, sir. Did anybody else have a key to it? To your knowledge? Not to my knowledge. All right. Did anybody have permission to be in that house at night? No. Object to that as also being a conclusion, Your Honor. Overruled. If he has the key to the house and the exclusive right to sell it, then he has, in effect, the right to say who goes into that house. I don't know whether he has the sole and exclusive right to sell it, but maybe it wouldn't give him the right to say who went into the house. Mr. Wood, you should know that if a person has given an exclusive listing and is given a key, that he certainly has some right as to who occupies the house outside of the owner. I don't argue with that, Your Honor, with that person who has the key has some rights, but I don't know how many other people had keys. He said nobody else had keys to his knowledge. That is based on hearsay, Your Honor. I object to it. Overruled. How could he possibly know who else had a key? I think it is a conclusion and based on hearsay, Your Honor. It is based upon guesswork. The objection is overruled. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? You may. Your Honor, I have a series of photographs of a house, the interior of a house, and may these photographs collectively be marked as People's Exhibit 1A through E for identification? Yes. No objection. I have shown them to defense counsel, Your Honor. Mr. Haber, I show you People's Exhibit 1A for identification. Is that the house on E Brook? Yes. I show you People's Exhibit 1B for identification. Is that the interior of the house? Yes. On March 7, do you recall drapes being hanging in the windows of that house? Yes, they were hanging in there. Did you, on the evening of March 7, 1973, go to that house? Yes. About what time did you go to the house? I am pretty sure it was around 11:30 or 12 o'clock. I am not real positive of the time, but I think it was approximately that time. Who was there at that time? At the time that I arrived there was a police car. The people from across the street were over there, and Mr. Roscoe's car was there. Mr. Roscoe was there. I can't offhand name the people who were there. I show you People's Exhibit 1C for identification. Does that picture accurately depict the condition of the house on that evening in question? Yes. Are these drapes on the floor? They appear to be drapes on the floor. I hand you People's Exhibit 1E for identification. Do those appear to be drapes on the floor? Yes, they were on the floor. Were they on the floor that evening? They were, yes. I hand you People's Exhibit 1D. Now, this is out of order. Do those also appear to be drapes? Yes. Now, do you know the defendant in this case, Mr. Roscoe? Yes, I do. Did he work for you? He worked for the same company which I work for. He didn't work for me personally. To the best of your knowledge, did he have permission to go into the house on the evening of? I object to that as a conclusion, Your Honor. I will sustain the objection. Did you give him permission? No. You are the only person that had the key. To the best of my knowledge, I was the only person that had the key. I didn't have it, but it was on file in the office. Did anybody have permission to be in the house on that night to the best of your knowledge? Object to that as calling for a conclusion. Sustained. On the evening of March 7, did you still have the key to that house? The key was in the office and I stopped by and picked it up on my way to the house. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Mr. Wood, Mr. Haber, you aren't a broker, are you? No. You don't own the realty company you work for? That is correct. And the listing wasn't between the seller and you, but it was between the seller and your employer. That was an agreement between the agency that I work for and the seller. Now, you had a key to the house in your office, I take it? Yes, sir. Do you know how many keys were issued to various, strike that. Isn't it a fact that this house was placed on the multiple listing service? Yes. And do you know, either yes or no, do you know of your own personal knowledge? Again, strike that. Did you observe the owner give a key to that house to anybody? Personally observe it? No. Then you don't know of your own personal knowledge how many keys were in fact given to you? No, I am not sure I understand that question. You said how many keys were given to me? Yes, how many keys were given to you? One key. How many keys were given to the other persons, to your knowledge? I have no knowledge of that. I have nothing further, Your Honor. You may step down. One further question. You don't own the house, do you? No, sir. And you didn't own the drapes, did you? No, sir. Okay, nothing further. Now, the people will call Dolores Lockhart. Be seated, state your full name. Dolores Elaine Lockhart. Mrs. Lockhart, do you reside at 14412 Eadbrook Drive, Hacienda Heights? Yes. Is that directly across the street from a house that appears to be this house in People's Exhibit 1A? For identification? Yes, it is. I direct your attention to March 7, 1973 at approximately 11 p.m. Were you at home that evening? Yes, I was. Did you notice anything unusual across the street from your house? I had just come home from a meeting and there was a car across the street. My husband seen it too, and the house was vacant. Did you see anybody in the house across the street? No, not at first. Did you see somebody there later? Yes. Do you see that person in court today? Yes. No, I didn't see him in the house. I saw only a figure at the window. What was the figure doing in the window? The drapes were moved and he was kind of walking back and forth in front of it. What happened after you saw these drapes being moved? I told my husband. What happened then? We both went out in front and I called the sheriff. You called the sheriff. He told me to go back in and call the sheriff. Did you see anybody in the house later on? No. Did you see anybody that evening who is in the courtroom today? Yes, I did. Will you point to that person right there? Indicating the defendant. Where did you see the defendant? Well, what happened? Objection, Your Honor. Just answer the question. Where did you see him? I saw him, a man walking down the street. He came from the back of the property where the empty house was, and I told my husband a man was walking. I object to what she told her husband as being hearsay, Your Honor. I will sustain the objection. Anyway, he picked the man up and brought him back, and that is when I saw him. I talked with him. The man had walked away. The defendant, the man that you just pointed to, did you detect any liquor on his breath that evening? No, I didn't. He acted very funny, but I didn't smell anything. Did you see the defendant out on the street? Yes, I did. How far was he from the vacant house? You mean after my husband brought him back? Yes. Well, we were right in front of the house. But when you first saw him, where was he? The figure I saw, he was in the house at the front window. The figure you saw in the house, did that appear to be that of the defendant? I really don't know. No, I couldn't say that. His car was parked in front of the house. Objection, Your Honor. His car would be her conclusion as to whose car it was. Objection sustained. His registration was in it. Objection, hearsay. Just a moment. There is no question pending. I am sorry, Your Honor. May the answer be stricken? It may be stricken. Did you observe the registration of the car parked outside of that house? No, I didn't. My husband did. The lights were on in the house. Is that correct? Yes, they were on. And you saw this figure moving the drapes around? Yes. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Mrs. Lockhart, how far away were you from the defendant when you first observed him walking on the street? I was at the corner and the figure came from like the backyard. The house isn't fenced in. Well, the question is, how far were you from him? Can you estimate for us, for example, half a block or in yards or whatever? It would be like a whole length of a yard, the whole width of a lot, for example? Yes. Was the area illuminated by street lights or any other illumination? Yes, there are street lights. Was the defendant under or near a street light? Yes, he was walking from the back and then across the street. He was right under the light and then he walked down another street. When you first observed him, where was he in relation to the house? He was walking from someplace, but where was he exactly in relation to the house? Well, at the time, he walked at the back of the house. Is there a sidewalk at the rear of the house? Well, it is on a corner lot, and he came from the backyard. Object to that. You said he came from the backyard? Yes. Where was he when you first saw him? On the sidewalk? On the sidewalk, yes. You didn't actually see him leave the house? No, I didn't. The first time you saw him, he was on the sidewalk? Yes. And you couldn't identify the person who was in the house, could you? No, I couldn't. Nothing further, Your Honor. You may step down. The people will call Mr. Darrell Lockhart. Be seated, state your full name. Darrell Lockhart, Lockhart. Starts with the court. Be seated, state your full name. Darrell Lockhart, Lockhart. Mr. Lockhart, are you the husband of the preceding witness, Dolores Lockhart? That is correct. Directing your attention to March 7, 1973, did your wife call your attention to anything unusual pertaining to a house across the street from your home? Yes, she did. Did you go across the street to the other house? Yes, I did. Directing your attention to People's Exhibit 1A for identification, does that appear to be the house you went to? Yes, it does. Did you go there with another person, Mr. Griffin? Mr. Griffin came out later. I went over alone. Where did you go to on that property, sir? I approached the house. I was on the sidewalk approximately in line with the front door. There was a car parked facing in the wrong direction, and when I approached the car, I heard the front door of the house close. What did you do then? At that time, I looked in the front seat of the car, and I saw some materials on the front seat. I was looking for identification primarily. Did you find any identification? I did find a checkbook and a name in it. Object to that, Your Honor, and move to strike it. Overruled. What name did you see in the checkbook? Objection, hearsay, Your Honor. The best evidence would be the checkbook. Overruled. Overruled, Your Honor. If he is going to say what is on the checkbook, the best evidence would be the checkbook itself, and the checkbook itself would be hearsay as to the identification of the party. Overruled. Now, what name did you see on the checkbook in the car, sir? To the best of my knowledge, Douglas Roscoe. Did you go back to this house? At that point, I opened the front door and turned on the entry hall light. Did you see anybody inside of the house? No, I didn't. I called the name Doug 2 or 3 times and requested that he come out. Then I proceeded into the hallway leading into the family room and turned on another light. And at that point, I could see the sliding glass door out into the patio to be opened. Did you go through the sliding glass door area? No, I didn't. Did you see anything else? Did you see anybody in the vicinity of that house? No, I didn't. Did you detain anybody that evening, sir? Yes, I did. Is that person in court today? Well, yes, sir, he is. Will you point to that person, please? Right there, indicating the defendant. Where did you detain the defendant? On Old Canyon Road, approximately halfway between Capinda and Orange Grove. How far away was this from the house? Approximately 3 blocks. What led you to detain and apprehend the defendant? Object to that. Now that would be his conclusion as to what led him to do something, Your Honor. I will sustain the objection. How did you detain him? At the time that I came out of the house, I told my wife to call the sheriff's department. At that time, Mr. Griffin was out there, and he was standing at the corner of Beach Hill and Eadbrook, and we noted an individual in a white shirt exit a property about 2 or 3 doors down Beach Hill where we were at the time. I thought it was rather unusual for somebody to be walking that way. I got into my car, and Mr. Griffin got into his car, and I went east on Eadbrook and then north on Old Canyon, and Mr. Griffin had gone north on Beach Hill and was following this guy in the white shirt, and he came by and said, object to that, Your Honor. What was said as hearsay, I will sustain the objection. Did you apprehend the defendant? I continued around the block and pulled into the driveway on Old Canyon. When I saw him coming down the street, I got out of my car and I said, Doug, you left your car parked in front of my house. You are referring to the defendant? That is correct. What did he say? If anything, objection, Your Honor. I think what the defendant said at this time would be hearsay and not for probable cause. Overruled. Did the defendant say anything? To the best of my knowledge, he said something to the effect that he guessed he did. He appeared to be having a little trouble in getting his thoughts together. I suggested that he get into my car and I would take him back up to his automobile, and he agreed. Had you ever seen the defendant before? Not to my knowledge. Did he get into your automobile and you went back to your house? Yes, I pulled up. As I said, his car was parked in the wrong direction on the north side of the street. I approached and I pulled in directly in front of him, and the other car, Mr. Griffin, pulled his car in behind. And did you subsequently turn Mr. Roscoe over to the deputy sheriffs? That is correct. We waited for the sheriffs. I have nothing further. Mr. Wood. 225 for voice for 5 minutes. Cross by defense attorney. The only time out there at the scene of this accident that you got out of your car was to get out and stand briefly at the side of the car? Yes, sir. Now, from the scene, you proceeded onto your home and took a Valium? Yes. And that was a Valium supplied by the doctor? Yes. And the following day, I gather this was on a Sunday that the accident happened? Yes. The following day was a work day and you went to work, correct? Yes. And you were working where at that time? Dr. Shipley and Elson. And did you work that day? Yes. What were your duties with Dr. Shipley's office? Bring patients in, get them ready for the doctors, give shots, write out prescriptions so the doctor could sign them, and take histories of the patients, ordering supplies and all that. What an office nurse has to do. Just to back up for a moment again, while you were out of the car, did you look at the damage to Mr. Dunlap's Cadillac? I did not look at any damage. Did you talk to the driver or occupant of the car of the head of Mr. Dunlap's Cadillac? Yes, I did, sir. I talked to the lady who was in front of the car, which one we was pushed into. Did you talk to her? When I was standing out holding onto the car and getting more sicker, did she say anything about your nosebleed or you're looking ill? She asked me how I feel, and I said, I'm all shook up and I'm getting sick to my stomach. I have to go back to the car, and this was all. That's the only conversation you had with her? And she said that the man in the back of us was his fault. Well, Your Honor, I'll move to strike this. This will be hearsay as to my client. It's hearsay as to your client. All right. And tell me everything she said, please. I don't remember anything that she said to me except that's what I told you. All right. I take it that's the length and extent of the conversation that you had with her? Yes. Did you talk to anyone else from that car From the car in front of us? In front, no. But what about the gentleman to the rear, Mr. Love? Did you talk to him? No. And you did not talk to the police officer? Pardon me. You did not talk to the police officer? No. So the following Monday, you went to work and you worked that entire day, did you? Yes, but I feel very bad. Well, all right. But you worked that day? Yes, I worked. And what about Tuesday? Did you work Tuesday? Yes. And how about Wednesday? I worked Wednesday. Did you work that whole week? As I recall, yes. You worked through then, Monday through Friday? Yes. Now, you were working 5 days a week at this time, right? Yes. So you worked that full week, correct? I think so. Now, being a nurse and an employee of a medical doctor, did you avail yourself of your boss's services? That is, did you go to him and say, I was hurt in an accident, will you treat me? No, all right. So you, during that week, did not tell Dr. Shipley or any of his associates that you were hurt? No. Did you by any chance go and see Dr. Horst during that week? I seen that doctor, yes, during that week. I don't remember exactly if it was that week. I think it was a couple of days after the accident, but I don't remember exactly. It's such a long time ago. Do you remember to the extent that it was at least a couple of days after the accident, right? Yes, I think so. That was the very first time you sought medical attention for yourself other than taking the Valium given to you by Mr. Dunlap? Yes. But what about the next week after the accident? Did you work that week? I worked that week and I started dropping things and it scared me very bad, like syringes. When I pulled up the medication and I started shaking, I started losing my grip in my right hand and I started falling and it scared me to death. And I went again back to the doctor and I told him what happened. All right. Did you keep on working at Dr. Shipley's office? I tried to, yes. All right. And when you say you tried to, were you able to, for that second week, to work there? I think I worked there. How about the third week? Did you work there the third week? I worked there and I took Anacin and Bufferin and I hardly could stand the pain. Well, but you did work, right? Yes. How long did you work there, Mrs. Dunlap, before you took off from that job? By took off, I mean ceased to work there because of one reason or another. 3-4 weeks, I don't remember exactly. So you were able to work then at Dr. Shipley's office for at least 3 or 4 weeks before it was necessary for you to take off from work because of your injury, correct? Yes. I think this is a good place to take our recess. Please remember the admonition. 15 minutes, please. Thank you, Your Honor. All right. Sir, you can go on if you want. Now, at some time following the accident, you were contacted by State Farm through Mr. Hill? Yes. And he called you on the phone? Yes. And as I understand your testimony, he at that time, or sometime about that time, said not to worry about anything, that he would take care of everything. That is correct. Up until that time, had you consulted with the attorney that was representing you in your divorce about this accident? No, sir. Did you ever consult with him about the accident? No, sir. And Mr. Hill contacted you on a pretty regular basis after that, right? Yes, sir. And you discussed it with him, that is, your claim. You discussed your case with him on a pretty regular basis, right? Yes, sir. And everything went just fine until after the 1 year had expired. And he then said, ha ha, lady, you missed the boat? But what do you mean exactly by everything was going fine? Well, you were getting along with him all right, were you? With Mr. Hill? Yes, yes, all right. But not with my health? No, that isn't what I mean. Okay. Sometime in November, before the year expired, you had a conversation with him in which you told him that he wanted $30 for your case? Yes, that is correct. And did you tell him at that time that you had discussed the matter with an attorney? No. Had you in fact talked to any attorney at that time? No. I believe the question has been asked and answered, Your Honor. Okay, we are starting off with the court going into direct examination by defense attorney. Could you state your full name and spell each name? Carol, C-A-R-O-L-E, Lynn, L-Y-N-N, Gary, G-A-R-Y. Miss Gary, please have a seat at the witness stand to my right. Mrs. Gary, what is your occupation? First of all, it's Miss. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Could you give us your educational background? I have a BA in elementary education and 13 years of postgraduate work in child psychotherapy. And what positions have you held? Chief social worker for Child Guidance Clinic, coordinator of the Voluntary Out-of-Home Placement Program for the County Children's Services, psychotherapist, and director of aftercare for Children's Day Treatment Center in Orange. I worked 2 years with the Department of Health in Los Angeles. I was a consultant for Head Start. Right now, I have a private practice and I work quite closely with all the schools. And my expertise is in play therapy. And I went to Tulane. What educational institutions have you? University of Maryland, LSU. My graduate work was done at Tulane. My internship was at Tulane Medical School. Have you ever testified in court before? Yes. How many times? Once. Was it this court? No. What court was that? Juvenile court. I would like to qualify Miss Gary as an expert witness. May I voir dire? Yes. Miss Gary, in what capacity did you testify in juvenile court? As a therapist for the two youngest girls in one of the, what do you want to call it? More well-known cases in the County of Orange for child abuse. Were you qualified at that time? Yes. As an expert witness? Yes. You indicated that your area of expertise is play therapy. Would you explain that a little bit? Working with younger children and utilizing play as a major modality. Like if children are not able, let's say, I would prefer talk and verbalization. But if children are not able to verbalize their feelings, then one way to go about getting to issues or conflicts is through using play techniques such as the dollhouse, such as toys. Depending on a diagnosis and evaluation kind of structure, I might want play therapy to go on. Do you want to know a lot about it? No. What's the highest degree you hold? A master's in social work. How long have you been in private practice? Well, off and on for the last 5 or 6 years while I have had jobs. All right. You indicated you testified in only one other case. Did that case involve the issue of child molestation? Yes. It did? Yes. And have you had, 2 other cases. They both were sexual and physical abuse cases. Have you had very much experience in dealing with children alleged to have been molested? About half of my caseload over the years. Okay. Usually after children have been placed in foster homes. Not too many with reunification.